Okay, everyone, thank you for attending this week's Shelter in Studio. My name is Sarah Songer, and I'm the Program and Studio Manager at the San Francisco Center for the Book. And this week, our guest is artist Solange Roberdeau. Solange lives and works in Northern California. She received her MFA from the Maryland Institute College of Art in 2012 and holds a BFA in printmaking from the Rhode Island School of Design. She currently has a solo exhibition, Beyond Latitude, at Municipal Bonds Gallery in San Francisco, and is included in the current exhibition, Contemporary Art Taos 2020 at the Harwood Museum of Art in Taos, New Mexico. In 2021, she received 3 grants from the Arts Council of Mendocino County to teach Japanese sumigashi marbling to children in Mendocino County public schools. In 2019, she founded Second C Studios, an online fine art teaching platform, and has worked with Kala'a Art Institute, San Francisco Center for the Book, the Maryland Institute College of Art, Image Flow, Form and Concept, Cairo American College, and the Branson School doing fine art instruction. And with that, we will turn it over to Solange.
Great. Hi, everyone. Nice to meet you. I'm going to change my view here. Screen share some images I prepared for you. Can you all see that? Great. Okay. Yeah, welcome. I thought I would just give a little overview with some images to kind of illustrate my process, and then really emphasize the importance of place in my imagery, and also just in the process of working with materials and making images. So I wanted to start with a quote that I love from Rebecca Solnit's book, Wanderlust, A History of Walking. I often think about my practice in relationship to walking. And so when I found this Rebecca Solnit quote, it felt really appropriate. So I'll just read it to you. When you give yourself to places, they give you yourself back. The more one comes to know them, the more one seeds them with the invisible crop of memories and associations that will be waiting for you when you come back, while new places offer up new thoughts, new possibilities. Exploring the world is one of the best ways of exploring the mind, and walking travels both terrains. And I love the analogy to image making and processing and working with materials to walking, because I feel that as my practice has kind of evolved, it really is in relation to processing ideas that are outside of the places I'm working, but also simultaneously the places that I'm making things. So I feel like there's a certain serendipity in walking and being in a place. There's a certain level of control, and then a certain level of chance happenings and experiences. And so I approach materials and the images that I make in my studio that way. So sometimes the images I'm making are in direct relationship to objects that I find on walks, or textures that I think are interesting in places. And then other times, actually more recently, the images have become a little bit more abstract. They're a little further away from direct references, and kind of more about a feeling. If somebody can translate the feeling of a place, it's so subjective, but it's really about kind of expansive, trying to capture a sense of expansiveness, or I don't know, perpetual kind of motion and learning and collecting information. And so oftentimes, and more recently, as I'm working more and more minimally or more abstractly, I've found that a way to convey that the thing that I get excited about in that is by pairing kind of organic shapes with geometric, kind of hard edge, something that feels a little bit more controlled or a little bit more human, with something that's more about things that are phenomenological, like wind, or in this particular image, this is a Suminagashi image. And so the patterning of the ink comes out of the movement of the water that the ink's sitting on. So there's a certain level of me controlling what's happening and choosing when to set the paper down. But there's also a level of serendipity that I really like capturing, and then pairing something that's a little bit more controlled with. This image also has some gilding in it, and that's a craft technique that I've started using a lot in the last 5 years. I worked for a long time as a studio assistant for someone who uses a lot of, his name's Robert Kushner, and he uses a lot of gilding in his work. And so I learned the process from him, and it's a really controlled craft technique. But it also has um, a quality that feels very kind of unique visually, informally. It really pops away from whatever your metal, the flatness of metal kind of pops away from whatever you're pairing it with. And so in thinking about this pairing of something that's controlled with something that's organic, that material itself also kind of fulfills this quality that I'm attracted to. So as I mentioned before, there have been instances of using found objects that I find on walks, or collecting imagery through photographs. This image and the next were from a series called Driftwood that was all inspired by, first from forms that I'd find on the beach, driftwood forms, and then bring back to my studio and pair with other found forms or geometric shapes to create this sort of sense of spaciousness, and to abstract to begin with something that's recognizable, but then to kind of abstract it so that the image becomes more about movement and less about something really specific, a really specific representation of something. This is an image from New Mexico. I spend a lot of time between California and New Mexico, and have a real affinity for that landscape too. And these are some images that came out of time spent outside of Taos on the mesa. So this is a heavyweight watercolor paper. I'm also going to focus a little on materials, because as much as the thinking and the walking and the collecting of forms is really a big part of my process, tactileness is also a big part, tactileness in my studio. So material choices are important to me, and the specific qualities of different materials. So this was made on a really heavyweight watercolor paper that I could pour a lot of different layers of ink on in different steps, and that it could handle a lot of liquid, a lot of water. So it's a mix of sumi ink and walnut ink, and then these areas, this and this, are oxidized. This is an oxidized copper area, and this is just a gilded area. These images were also made out on the Taos Mesa. In the afternoons, there are often monsoons in the summer in Taos, and I was making a series of these kind of out in that weather. and looking at forms that were there, but really actually feeling, trying to kind of translate the feeling of being out in that kind of environment. I've lived out in a rural environment now for a long time. I actually moved back to the county where I was born, in Mendocino County, but I lived in New York for a long time, and in Western Massachusetts and Rhode Island, and in urban areas. And so I felt that they're also, all of these images are from rural landscapes, but I also think that if I were living in a more urban area, there would be this sort of influence coming from that kind of landscape. Again, the importance of representation of a specific object is not my main focus. I really am interested in something that's more uncanny, and maybe finding forms that feel familiar, translating forms that feel familiar, but then kind of moving them into this other space that actually is for a third set of eyes. You know, it's for somebody else to kind of translate and um, and project their own experience on. These images aren't in chronological order. These are older. I think they were done in 2017, and this was some paper from Kyoto, and I used, again, walnut ink, sumi ink, and graphite. And then sumi ink comes in two different colors. Traditionally, there's a vermilion sumi and a black sumi. And I was looking at driftwood forms. This is a series that's actually up now at Municipal Bonds Gallery in San Francisco, and it was made with walnut ink and two different kinds of sumi ink and graphite. And I was staying at a residency where I was around a lot of Bauhaus imagery, and so I think that there was some kind of inspiration from that environment, the human elements of that environment. I'm also, I'm really interested in patterns that humans create. And at this point, I was thinking about, you know, the juxtaposition of different aesthetics, different sort of patterns from from a time period. And I was looking at a lot of the textiles made by Annie Albers and Gunther Stotzel, and just thinking about the juxtaposition of the making, the sort of material making, and the spontaneous moments in that, and then the the ideas, the geometry or the patterning that comes out of that. And those are actually just 3 of a series of 9. And let's see, I'll move through these so we have time to talk a little bit more too. This is an example. I put a lot of these in here at the risk of being a little bit didactic, but this is an example of using a view that I was seeing a lot on walks that I was taking, and bringing that view back in my studio and thinking about this sort of pointed a sort of oculus or a binoculars or something, and pointing to uh, creating a gaze to that sort of abstraction that was in the environment and highlighting that, but using that sort of highlight to create more abstraction.
Solange, can I filter in a couple of questions as you go that might be appropriate? So a couple of people are wondering about the scale that you're working at. And so maybe as you're going through, can you give us an idea about size on these guys?
Totally. Here, and I can also change my viewer here. So these are small. A lot of the images that I've been showing are smaller. So this is, I think that they're in the sort of 6x9 range inches. And this one is a little bit larger than that, but they're also, most of them are pretty small. There was an image that I showed earlier of that was made on the Taos Mesa that's quite large. But otherwise, I think my tendency is to work smaller. There's a piece, I pulled out this piece behind me as a sort of backdrop, but that's the largest I've ever worked. It's about 4 feet by 4 feet, but usually the tendency is to go kind of smaller.
Thanks. And what is this amazing metallic thing that's happening right here?
So this is also that same, it's the gilding process, and this is a different kind of metal leaf. So you can get all different kinds of metal leaf, and this is called variegated copper. And I think that quality comes out of heating the copper. But so you buy it with that sort of oil on water texture. And then the rest is semi ink.
I've never seen that.
And yeah, please feel free to, if there are more questions.
Okay, yeah. There's a question from Melody. She says she's noticed you use color in a really unique way and is wondering how you think about color when you're working on a piece. Do you have a palette in mind, or do you just start and then decide?
The color is often determined by the materials that I'm using. So I've been working, I've just limited my material palette in the last 5 years just to kind of dig in. And so Sumi ink, the 2 different kinds of Sumi ink, the orange and the black, and then the color of the metal leaf when it's oxidized or when it's on its own. If it's 21 karat, I use a lot of 21 karat moon gold, which has kind of a silvery color. But for a long time, actually, I didn't work in color because I really wanted to focus on the forms. And I wasn't sure, I also have a photography background, and I wasn't sure how to think about color conceptually. If it should be true to the forms that I was drawing, or I was having a hard time giving myself freedom using color. And and so actually just figuring out that focusing that the material part of the process is so important, that focusing on the material colors kind of made the most sense for me. Does that answer your question?
Well, we'll find out. She'll put it in the chat if she wants to know. She says yes.
Oh, good. Okay. I don't know how many. I think I put a lot in here. I'll just keep scrolling and.
Yeah. Andy, who lives in the Sierras, she was our guest last week. I think this comes from a place close to her heart. Wonders if the experience of all of the wildfires sort of threatening your home and space last year, if that has influenced your work.
Yeah. Yeah. God, I mean, that was so intense for all of us, right? And not being able, I live in a pretty small space, so I work small, but also I like to take things outside to work. Um, and especially doing the Sumi Nagashi, a couple years ago, I started working on bigger Sumi Nagashi pieces. And so I have large trays of water that I work with outside. And so during those fires, just having to stay inside the whole time was a little bit intense in that way. Also just, you know, not being able to get that. I think one of the benefits of being in such a rural area through this last year was being able to be outside, you know, and I felt really grateful for that. And so the wildfires were pretty scary because they were in this county too, but also just feeling kind of trapped and having that limit my working process was tough. But there was actually in the show that's up at Municipal Bonds, there's a series of Sumi Nagashi pieces that I did. I think it was the first or second day that the air had cleared a little bit, and and they just really feel the Sumi Nagashi looks so smoky anyway, but they really feel to me like that moment. And so I called them um, September Complex after the August Complex fire, but I think that it was in September that there were a few days that started feeling a little clearer here.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, definitely, I definitely felt affected.
All right. I'll stay quiet so you can keep going.
No, please, please, if anybody has any questions, just
Yeah.
let them out. Um, this is this is closer to the work that I've been making in the last couple of years. I found there was a moment a couple years ago where I just wanted to really explore what made me excited about image making. I was using elements from the environment, and I was relating those to something existential, kind of being in the environment, but also I think there was a tendency to kind of, they were feeling a little, I don't know, like I needed to kind of break things down to get a little bit more minimal to then expand again, maybe. Um, and so these came out of that and some exercises that I did with artist tape, where I actually just taped a line of tape across a piece of paper and then dipped it in ink and then took the tape off. And so there was this tension that came out of that straight line against an organic background. And that tension is really exciting to me. And it's always been exciting with the sort of flip-flopping of positive and negative space, but that was a really important moment for me in my practice to kind of go, oh, okay, this is what I want to perpetuate. I really want to play with that tension, you know, either with materials or with marks. And so that led to these pieces, some of which are also up in San Francisco right now. There's something about that line too that feels really, really, it's funny to say it, but kind of cinematic. There's something that feels like time and movement and the way your eye kind of moves across it. And so in thinking about my relationship to being in places and working and processing information when I'm drawing, that also felt exciting. And I was making a lot of these in a studio space in Taos, where I was starting a little teaching space where I was when the lockdown first happened, the pandemic first started. And also because I was excited about this kind of these forms, I could also then just start creating a lot of those and digging into that idea, and that created a sense of continuity in that moment when everything felt a little nutty. So, this is an image of Taos, the landscape there, and everybody talks about the light in New Mexico, but it really is amazing, and especially in northern New Mexico. I don't know if it's the altitude or what's going on there, but it's just so distinctive. And I think coming from a printmaking background, I've also worked for a lot of printers and worked in print shops, fine art print shops. And I think that history really influences the way I construct a drawing too. I can see that, especially in these pieces. This one was made with a sort of, it's a drawing, but I was using a sort of printmaking, a monoprint kind of attitude, and then building on top of that. So having some sort of visual anchor and then building on it. I'm noticing the time is, oh no, we're going to 1:30.
No, it ends at 1. It's just a half an hour. Yeah, it's fine. Yeah, we'll get through what we get through. It always seems like it'll be hard to fill, and then it goes fast.
Okay. Well, if anybody has any questions, please.
We have a couple of sort of more technical questions. It was the vermilion sumi ink that you were talking about.
Yeah, let me.
There's a question too about what kind of tape you use. We have a lot of, artists and craftspeople who always attend. They're like, ooh, give me the product details. Where can I buy that?
I have fancy artist tape, but then I also, I use a lot of painter's tape. Yeah. I use that blue painter's tape a lot because I use it in gilding. This is the vermilion sumi.
Yeah.
And so it's really neon. It's got this real neon orange color.
They want to know where they can get it.
Oh, I think it's around. I think at any art supply store. Yeah. Okay. It'll be sumi, no. Okay. Yeah, you can find, that's how I found it. I was just stocking up on my black sumi.
Okay.
Yeah. It doesn't work, strangely, it doesn't work with sumi nagashi.
Oh.
So I don't know what, I'm not sure how it's made, but black sumi ink is made from burnt vegetable oil. And so it has a certain viscosity. And I think that's how it works with the floating technique, floating on water. But if folks are interested in using it in sumi nagashi, for some reason it doesn't work, but you can buy sumi nagashi inks that are different colors. And I think that there might be an orange in there, but it's not the same intensity.
Does it just sink?
Yeah, it just sinks. It's so strange because with sumi nagashi, you're not thickening the water.
Yeah.
So it just, yeah. It just sinks.
Well, unless any last questions come in, is there any, obviously we haven't gotten to the full slide. Oh, wow. Is there anything you're looking forward to working on next?
Gosh. Yeah, I've been revisiting some things that I've started, actually. I have a lot of stuff in my flat file that, is either the base layer for something, or it was the beginning of a drawing and it just didn't feel right. And so I stopped, but I also often work in series. So I've got several, when I have things in my flat file, it's like, 5 or 3, or, it's kind of a series of working out an idea. So, yeah, I'm just excited about kind of digging in. I've been pretty busy recently, so I haven't had a ton of studio time.
Okay. Well, they always go fast. Thank you so much, Solange, for taking the time to speak with us today and show us your beautiful work. I'm not sure if you can see them, but there are lots of compliments in the chat. So thank you, and thanks to everyone else for attending. And